Good morning, everybody. We'll give people another minute just to get settled as they're coming in. But as people are coming in, I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. Our session today is establish healthy system conditions, implementation, and monitoring routines. So we'll just give another minute or so. And one thing that normally in our Zoom meetings we do like to have everybody's faces showing, but I think we've had a request that if we're not speaking, to turn our cameras off just for those who may have visual impairments, so they're not distracted by movement outside of the speaker. Greatly appreciate that. So thank you again. My name is Michael Imburgia. I am the Director of School Improvement Performance Management. I work mainly with CSI schools. I'm employed by Brooks County Intermediate Unit, but as I said, we work with schools all across the state. And my main focus is on evaluation and monitoring of school improvement plans. I'm going to be facilitating a large portion of today's meeting, but with me I have Liz Shotwell, who is a regional lead working with CSI schools. We also have Anne Styling, who is the school improvement facilitator working with CSI schools. And I'm also really happy to have a team from John Harris High School with us today. Ms. Cynthia Spencer, she's a business education teacher. Ms. Carenza Finley, Dean of Students. And Ms. Michelle Felton, the associate principal. So at any point in time, you may hear one or more of our voices chiming in. So today, our session objectives are to understand what makes a progress monitoring routine different from a regular meeting. We're going to explore some sample tools used to collect monitoring and implementation data. And we'll also have an opportunity to hear how John Harris has implemented routines to monitor their school plan. So our agenda today, first we'll define key actions for plan monitoring and we'll view sample tools. Then we will discuss what makes routines different from meetings. We'll hear from John Harris. We'll break out to discuss differences in monitoring meetings, and we'll have a closing reflection and comments. As we get started, the first thing I'd like to do is just take 3 minutes to kind of activate our thinking and think back to this time last year as we were scrambling to figure out what this academic year was going to look like. Many people had some initiatives or plans in place, and just think about how you were planning to keep track of those plans for this year. So keep in mind what strengths you had in your approach that you'd like to replicate this year, and also what improvements you might want to prepare for 21-22. So this is just don't need to put anything in the chat, but just an idea to keep this in the back of your mind as we work through this so we can help to identify any of those areas. And please feel free to, if there's a practice that you found useful in monitoring your plans, please feel free to add that to the chat or come off mute to enter any of that information. So we're just going to take 2 minutes. I'm practicing my wait time. Something Ms. Finley is great at, but something I need a little practice at. So we're going to give everybody just 2 minutes to think back and kind of reflect on planning coming into this year. So I think that might have been close to 2 minutes from when I started. So just keep those ideas in the back of your mind as we move forward and think about each of the different aspects of the progress monitoring routines and how they might be useful moving forward. So today we'll primarily focus on 3 phases of the cycle of improvement. We're going to look at implementing the plan, monitoring the plan, and adjusting course. While these phases may look sequential, once implementation starts, we also begin to monitor and adjust course. As we move throughout the presentation, please keep in mind that nothing is happening in isolation. We're implementing while we're monitoring and adjusting at the same time. So, as we discuss monitoring, we're going to assume that plans have SMARTY goals. And I'm not sure if people are familiar with the shift from SMART to SMARTY, but we're trying to make our goals aligned to be strategic, measurable, ambitious, realistic, time-bound, inclusive, and equitable. So kind of a shift from the old SMART goals, but to also make sure that we have all of our student groups included in our goals, and that we are differentiating as needed. We're also going to make the assumption that our plans have discrete action steps that build towards implementation. So in thinking through that, there are 3 actions built in formally and to have accountability to move from biweekly to quarterly. So just, I don't know if people can give a thumbs up in their reactions in Zoom, but is everybody familiar with the planning template that was provided in the accelerated learning documents? Is there a thumbs up or thumbs down in on your reactions in Zoom? Or you can throw that in the chat as well if you're not familiar with how to use reactions in Zoom. All right, seeing a lot of thumbs up. So we don't need to step through the, we won't walk through the planning document, but that's something that's available through the documents, the toolkit for accelerated learning. So for monitoring the plan, we're going to focus on 3 main actions. The first is biweekly monitoring. And that's where implementation teams assess and update the action plan for each strategy. So in our plans, we identified goals, and in order to meet those goals, we also have strategies. So our recommendation, at least through CSI, is that each strategy has an implementation team. That implementation team is generally made up of people on the ground who are really doing the work. We also recommend that the principal not be the lead of any implementation team. The reason for that is if you have 5 strategies working, having a principal being able to monitor and be in charge of any of those, I think would be really difficult. So we really look for distributed leadership here, to have some other individuals being able to lead, a team to implement the strategy. So when we say bi-weekly there, we're looking at every 2 weeks. So we really want to take a look at the action plans that we've developed every 2 weeks to know whether or not we're on track with our action steps. After the bi-weekly meetings, we also have monthly meetings, and those are a little more structured, and we call those monthly routines, and that's where the system leader really assesses the status of each action plan. So this is, instead of looking at each action step and seeing whether or not each strategy is working, it's really looking at each strategy and determining whether or not those strategies are on pace. Then we move to quarterly, which is the most formal of the routines, and this will include not only school leaders, but generally LEA leaders, and depending on if you're an identified school and through ATSI or CSI, you may have someone from the support team there as well. And these routines are where we look to see whether or not the implementation is happening, as well as the attainment of quarterly targets. So this is where we really shift from actions to outcomes. The quarterly routines are, said the most formal, and also the ones where we're really taking that move, to look, say, is this really having the impact on students that we were hoping for? So if we take a step back and look at that biweekly implementation, so the objective of that is to ensure the implementation team is aware of progress on action steps for the strategy. It's also to propose next steps to address action steps that are off track. So as people were developing their plans, and they may still be in the process of that, you may have listed 15, 20 action steps. So this is where, it doesn't need to be an in-person meeting. Like I said, this is the most informal of the monitoring routines. This could be, I'll share the implementation sheet with you in just a moment, but this could be done asynchronously, where people who are responsible for any action item are just saying, yes, we were able to, we're on time with that, we've completed that, we're falling a little behind, and adding some notes. The outcome of this monitoring is that the team is up to date on progress and can make mid-month adjustments preparing for monthly school leader meetings. So, for example, if professional development day were canceled, or something comes up in scheduling, the implementation team would be the ones to be most aware of that and to make sure that in the monthly meeting they're getting that back on the schedule at a later date. And I'm going to hopefully in the chat. So I'm going to put a link in the chat for people to be able to make a copy of this. And what this is a tool that we've developed for those implementation teams to be able to utilize and to be able to summarize data pretty quickly. And let me just drop the link in there for you. So if you click on that link, you should be asked to make a copy of this tool. And what this is the biweekly monitoring. We have a cover sheet. You can see there's no real data in here just yet. And then we have a tab for each of our strategies. So if we click on strategy 1, you're going to be directed to add the strategy name. Do a strategy called BAR, which is building assets, reducing risk. So we'll add that in there. There may be a number of action steps associated with that. With the action steps, we want to know who the person responsible is. And then here is just a drop down where you can say whether you're on time. Maybe we fell behind on one of them. We've completed a few. And if you scroll down, what that will do is automatically calculate the percentage and number that are not yet started, behind, on time, complete. And then it'll give you the percentage of action steps that are on time or complete. So you can see in the sample I just did, 83% of the action steps are on time or complete. It also provides the team an area to provide any evidence of, how we know that the action steps are on track. And also, if something is behind, we can enter some information into why. And then we have 2 questions at the bottom. So the first is, should we adapt the strategy? We need to adjust our action plan to problem solve implementation challenges, or we need to enhance the strategy because we are making progress but fell short of our target. So we'll pretend for this one that yes, we do need to adjust it. And we'll just leave this at no. And then what that would do is, on our cover page, it automatically pulls in all of those data. You can see that 83% of the actions are on track. And you can also see where the team said they fall and whether or not they need to continue with the implementation or if they need to make an adjustment. And it also pulls in the strategy name. So for a school leader who's not part of each of the action implementation teams, they could quickly go in here, take a look at the cover. If they are falling behind, they could jump into each of the strategies to see, any of the information that's entered by the team there. So just another way to help prepare for any of the monitoring meetings. So I'm going to take requesting for access. Sorry, I will fix that. Sorry about that. Hopefully that worked. So, once you make that copy, you can clear out all the data that I put in there, but should work for you moving forward. So I just want to stop there. Does anybody have any questions about kind of the purpose of the biweekly monitoring, or specifically about this tool that we found effective? We made some modifications for for the accelerated learning process, but this is something that we use in CSI that we've found to be pretty effective. So I'll just take a moment to see if anybody has any questions, either in the chat or feel free to come off of mute. Okay. So next we wanted to talk about the monthly monitoring routines. So monthly monitoring routines, kind of takes all of that information that we looked at the implementation teams where they're looking step by step. Now we want to talk about, how these are working overall. So the general function of each of the strategies. And this is also where you may be pulling in some of the formative data. BAR is, a program, we just looked at kind of, fake implementation plan for them. But they look at, reducing or increasing attendance. So, you may want to pull in some of your attendance information into some of these monthly meetings just to kind of give a snapshot. But for the most part, we're really focusing on plan implementation here. So again, the objective for this is for the school leader to really know where everything stands with each of the implementation plans. So are we on track or not with actually getting what we said done, accomplished? Also, this is an opportunity for those implementation teams, if they are facing any barriers that the school leader is able to handle, this is the space for them to be able to provide that information and try to get next steps. We generally, in CSI at least, try to have schools implement these into whatever leadership team meetings they already have established. So we aren't trying to add another meeting on top of all the meetings that principals are already being part of, but this is a way to carve out some space, within established meetings to be able to run through some of this information. And if those implementation teams are recording all that information in those biweekly sheets, everybody can kind of walk in with an understanding, so really can get right down to business of, where are we stuck, what needs to move forward to really help the team, make sure that they're implementing as best they can. So here's a sample report of the way that we look at our monthly implementation meetings. So we have our strategy at the top, using that building assets, reducing risk. We do report, I just threw some numbers in there so we had some calculations, but again, you can see that, percent on time complete, we can see, we're hitting most of our action steps, we're behind on a few. We also like to list out the outputs. So what are the things that we've done? Did we accomplish a PD? Did we have, we had 50 students attend, an event? Whatever those actual outputs are, we do want to take a look at that. We also want to see which goals we're tied to. So we're doing this strategy in order to increase our regular attendance and also increase the number of ninth graders on track to graduate. So that's what the strategy is geared towards. And we really try to make those through lines as evident as possible when we're doing our monitoring. And then we have some areas for, if we are facing barriers, what are those barriers and challenges? What actions can a school leader take to remove any of those barriers? And then what actions can the implementation team take to move all those? So we're always trying to really have that forward focus and focus on action. So, our monthlies are a little bit more formal. They're still not, we're not looking at student outcomes just yet, and we don't have maybe necessarily locked in roles, but we kind of moved from just looking at action steps to looking at how our implementation is going across the board. So I'll take another minute to see if anybody has questions about monthly meetings or any of the information on this form. So the other thing to note is I just pulled this for one strategy. If a school is implementing 3 strategies, you would just repeat this process for each of those 3 strategies. And we don't, so this is a form to collect information. This isn't how we structure our meetings. So we don't have our meetings go from one to the other to the other. We really try to have it as a discussion, and one person is, collecting this information so that we can have it recorded, but we don't, the form does not dictate the agenda. The form is just an output of the meeting. So I'm saying, is there a template for this? I can put together a template. So we don't have a template for this necessarily. This is in the planning documents through the accelerated learner toolkit. I think there is space for you to kind of track some of this in those documents. This is something we've developed for CSI schools. I appreciate the question though. If there's interest, I'm happy to make anything available. We'll just have to figure out where we can post it so people have access to it. So next, we'll talk about our quarterly monitoring routines. So quarterly routines are really the most formal of the monitoring routines. And as we think about our plan, this is also where we, before the annual goals, this is kind of the big chunks that we're looking at. Where do we know where we need to be in 3 months, 6 months, and 9 months in order to reach our goal? So in our quarterly meetings, we also generally expand the number of people the number of stakeholders in those meetings. This is where the LEA would most likely want to have a seat. We want our school leaders. We also want our implementation leads, and then in some cases there may be community members who have a stake in this plan, or like I said, if for schools that are CSI, ATSI, or TSI, there may be some other supports there as well. And the purpose of this is really to balance accountability and support. So in these meetings, we want to make sure that our strategies are effective in meeting those student outcomes. So if we've been implementing with 100% fidelity and we're in the third quarter, but we haven't seen our student data move, is it time to make a switch in that strategy? We really need to talk about, is the strategy effective? So that's what we really want to come to these meetings, being ready to have those discussions, looking at the efficacy of each of our strategies. Also, there may be things that are outside the control of the school that are hindering implementation or progress. So that's why having the member of the district or LEA at the table is really important, so that if a school is implementing, but could be a transportation issue, could be a student information system data issue where they just can't get the data out the way that they were looking for it. This is an opportunity to have the LEA and the school work together to really overcome any of those barriers. And at times there are barriers that the school's perceiving that, when the LEA is at the table, I've seen them quickly eliminated because it was just a misunderstanding or just a miscommunication. So this is really the opportunity to have everybody at the table who needs to be there. And then it also gives the LEA, that knowledge of what's happening in each of the schools as far as the plans that they've developed for this year. And so this form looks fairly similar. What we have here is, for each goal that the school has, we would have, the goal at the top, we would have the benchmark, so we look at what the numerical actual is. So for this one, we're looking at 85% of the 9th grade cohort will pass each of their core courses in marking period 1. The target was 85. Here we would put the actual number of students who were passing, and then we would be able to see the difference. And we go through each quarter, so we'd be able to see the progress across the year. We have some logic built into the system that we use. So I showed you, kind of pretending that the school didn't meet their benchmark. And when they don't, the school gets prompted for some questions of what role did implementation have in not meeting the benchmark, what were the other factors, and then what are the actions moving forward. So again, high level and moving toward action. One piece that we noted especially in year 1 of school improvement plans through CSI, was this benchmark needs to be revised. We had a number of schools who wrote a measurable annual goal. They thought they had their benchmarks lined up, but they realized that either the benchmark didn't necessarily speak to the measurable annual goal when they really got in there and looked at it, or with all the things that changed through the pandemic, they didn't have the metrics, or they just needed to make some adjustments. So this is also an opportunity in these quarterly meetings to adjust the benchmarks, generally not like lowering goal numbers or anything like that, but really looking at, this is attendance, so it's fairly consistent across, but if you were using STAR or MAP to measure against PSSA performance, do you have the right metric to do that? And an opportunity for people to really have a discussion about that. So I'm seeing a question in the chat. So is this report pulled from the Google Doc? The monthly report would generally, part of that where it has all those implementation steps, so those would come from the Google Doc. So we would just align that, right to the Google Doc with each of those implementation teams. This information, again, is information that we collect, but we don't really structure our meetings to just kind of walk through each of this. So kind of depending, schools have really made those quarterlies kind of work for them. So this sometimes, I also have the pleasure to be a school improvement facilitator for a school. After our meeting, I'll come back and kind of take all the notes that I have and just fill this in for each of the goals instead of walking through it this way. That way we have a much more natural conversation about the goals and implementation. Looking through, see if there's any more questions in the chat. So any questions about quarterly monitoring? Nice, thanks. So for those schools who do have plans in the portal, the Future Ready Planning portal, there is the plan monitoring tab in that, and that does have an opportunity for schools to enter actually very similar setup to the top here, where it has each quarter and you can enter the target, and then there's also a notes section. So schools are able to enter data right into the comprehensive planning portal, and then you can even export that through the reports in the portal. So we use a system outside of that, but that is also available. Thanks, Liz. All right. So next on our agenda, those again are the structures of the three routines that we have. Next, I really want to talk through what makes routines different than meetings. And the routine is different from a typical meeting. Staff devote significant time and energy to preparing data and an agenda for the routine that will allow leaders to focus on the evidence, discuss and assign next steps quickly. There's no debate about what the purpose of the meeting or about the technicalities within the data. Leaders enter the room with a general understanding of current progress, rather than spending precious time receiving updates from the colleagues. So I think we've all been in meetings where it's a 2-hour meeting and we spend an hour and a half kind of reviewing data and maybe get a half hour to talk about what we're going to do about the data. Routine structures, and really talking mainly about the quarterly, but also the monthly. Everybody's expected to walk into the meeting already having reviewed the data, having a pretty good understanding of what the data are and what the objectives of the meeting are. So that 80% of the time is really spent on next steps and actions that we're taking to adjust course. Routines are really structured so that we're not admiring the problem and that we're taking action on it. I think also we really wanted to highlight that it's a source of structure and discipline. So having a regular quarterly routine, like everyone knows when the date of that routine is. We try to get them out probably at the beginning of the year or when we want to have those meetings. We run routines not only with our schools, but we also do them internally for our CSI statewide team. I have the role of facilitator, and we'll talk a little bit about what that each of those roles looks like. But in those meetings, I'm generally trying to get agendas prepared, trying to coordinate with everybody, a week or two out to get some of those ideas. We get the data in front of everybody, shoot for a week, sometimes it's 3 days, but nobody should be walking into that meeting not having an opportunity to review the data, so that it's, we're not saying, we're 10% proficient on our STAR testing. It's, what are we going to do about the fact that we missed our goal by 3 percentage points? Is that, are we staying true with implementation? Do we need to make some adjustments? So the goal is really to get to action as quickly as possible. And one of the main benefits is really the ability for a routine to focus despite distractions. So we know in schools there's a million things going on at all times, and this year, even more so. One of the things that I'm, in our system really proud of is we have 94 schools that are identified as CSI. We were able to monitor implementation and benchmarking for all of our schools, and I think 9% had less than 90% of their implementation on track. So, the schools were able to actually implement the plans that they had in front of them, even through the pandemic, and we were able to look at that and have those regularly scheduled meetings throughout the year. And a lot of it was because we really established these routines, that these things are happening, monthly and quarterly. Again, the bi-weeklies have some play in them. Some schools set it up so we're just going to check in, have your action steps checked off by the second Tuesday of every month. That might have been what they did for implementation, and then in the monthly is when they really unpacked a lot of that. But this, having routines really was able to kind of cut through a lot of the noise, and like the fires and crisis that we saw throughout the year. So there are 4 key tenets to strong routines: regularity, strong execution, focus on performance, and action on performance. And what that really should yield is a balance of support and accountability. So in the meetings, there should be a group of people who feel accountable to the work, but they should also feel supported by the LEA, the school, and other stakeholders. And kind of unpacking that a little bit more. So when we talk about regularity, do they happen regularly enough? So are we having those monthly meetings as scheduled? Are we having the quarterly meetings as scheduled? Are the right people present? So this is one of the key challenges. Do you have a monthly meeting or a quarterly meeting without the school leader present? Probably not, because the purpose of those meetings is to come to action and to make decisions. And unless there's a decision maker in the room, that's something that we generally hold off on. So the strong execution. So the buy-in to the purpose and preparedness. Like I said, for our quarterly meetings, these aren't done the night before. It might, some tweaking might get done the night before, but the conversation for the quarterlies really start 2 to 3 weeks out when we start looking at data. We start thinking about how we want to present the data and what specific outcomes we're looking for in those meetings. Do we have high quality materials? Is everything aligned and tight so we're not scrambling in the meeting? Are they well facilitated, and do we have clear next steps? The focus on performance is one of the key pieces. So again, we're not admiring the problems. We're really looking at, did we do what we said we were going to do, and what adjustments need to be made? And then really making that action happen. So next steps to be able to say, in our next meeting, we're going to talk about X, Y, and Z. So sometimes these agendas kind of get set as you're moving through the process, because actions are being identified and need to be reported out back. Need to report it back out on. And the way we do that is we utilize what's called a T-shaped agenda. So again, we're not going to admire the problem. So in our meeting, we spend about 10% of the time coming to a shared view of progress. So that may be a brief data overview. We're going to look at a few of the high-level things or something that was really important to that meeting, so everybody's at least grounded and ready to move on. We spend 80% of the time on a deep dive of specific issues. So the majority of it is really talking about the actions that we need to take and making sure people have the supports in place for those. And then the last 10% is to identify and commit to clear next steps. So following this agenda, we really can stay away from the admiring the problem or talking about the problem in circles. We were fortunate enough at the state level to have CCSSO help us with this, getting this process off the ground. And as facilitator in the first meeting, I put the deck together, and we talked through some things, and got a lot of feedback from that. And some of it was, it took you 17 minutes to get to your first action item. You need to get there in 10 minutes. Like that's how strict they were trying to be and how structured they really wanted to be in this process. So at times it can feel a little clunky in moving from one section to another, but it's really going to getting to that 80% to talk about what needs to happen is the most important thing. And then we also have for our routines, we do have some established roles. Again, the biweekly and monthlies, some of this may shift around, but for the quarterlies, we really do look at certain people around the table. So kind of have our table cut in half here, and we have a school leader who's really the person holding those accountable. So depending on whether it's a school routine, LEA routine, who is that person who essentially holds others accountable for the results, also asking the tough questions, but also being able, to decide on some of those supports. So at a school, this would generally be the principal. The facilitator, which is the role I get to play in our statewide meetings, prepares the system leader for the meeting. I work with our leader to really set the agenda. So I'll come with some potential agenda items. We a week or two before the routine, we'll come to the 2 agenda items that we really want to be able to tackle. We'll get the data together for that. I'll also kind of prepare those being held accountable for what that agenda is going to look like, what some of the potential questions would be, and then in the meetings with the leader, I know where some of the sticking points are going to be. So I try to prep those being held accountable to know where those sticking points are, and say, in this meeting, we're going to need to be prepared to talk about X, Y, or Z. Why are 3 schools only at 12% implementation for some of their strategies? We also want to have an analyst who holds the day-to-day knowledge of implementation progress. So, who is it that kind of holds the data? They're not necessarily the one making meaning of all the data, but they're there, they know what's going on, they can answer those really technical questions that may come up. And then you have your accountable owner. So in the examples we've been using, those would really be those implementation leads. So they're the ones being held accountable to making sure that implementation is off the ground. So I'll hold here for another minute to see if there's any questions coming in there. So, those are generally the 3 primary actions we have in our monitoring routines. Also, try to explain how those are different than a normal meeting. Again, it really comes down to the prep that every member walks in the door with, and then that clear focus on action. So next, we're going to have an opportunity to hear from our John Harris campus team. They are out of Harrisburg High School. I'm going to stop my share so that Ms. Felton can take control.
Thanks, Mike, and good morning, everyone. I'm Michelle Felton. I'm an associate principal at Harrisburg High School, John Harris campus, and we're going to speak today just a little bit about what we do in terms of implementation and monitoring of our school improvement plan. We'll start with some introductions. We'll talk about our vision. Our vision is really the priority in our school and drives everything that we do related to school improvement. We'll go through our steering committee structure, our implementation team structure. We'll discuss successes, challenges, and barriers. We will have some conversation around lessons learned and what we would like to do moving forward. And then at the end, we will leave some time for questions and discussion. So I will turn it over to Ms. Spencer to start us off with introductions.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Cynthia Spencer. I am a business education teacher at Harrisburg High School, John Harris campus. I actually operate a program called the School of Business and Industry, also known as SBI. I've been in the district now for 11 years, and this is my second career, but I just love building relationships with the students and parents in our district.
Thank you, Ms. Spencer. Ms. Finley.
Good morning. My name is Karenza Finley, and I am the 10th grade Dean of Students at Harrisburg High School, John Harris campus. I have been in the Harrisburg School District for 22 years under various roles: teacher, reading specialist, instructional coach, and I am loving my new position as a dean. And I am very happy to be here today to help share about our school's plan. Ms. Felton.
Thank you so much, Ms. Finley and Ms. Spencer. I'm Michelle Felton. I'm one of 3 associate principals at Harrisburg High School, John Harris campus. I have been in the Harrisburg School District for 17 years. 13 of those 17 years I spent as a high school social studies teacher at SciTech High School. And then I spent some time as an instructional coach, a few months as an assistant principal, and I am finishing out my first year as an associate principal. So Harrisburg School District, between the three of us, we have spent a lot of our careers here. We love the students and we love our colleagues. So we're excited to share with you today. We're going to start with the reading of our vision, and we do this at every meeting in our school. And Ms. Finley will talk to you a little bit more about why we do that and what impact that has made. So at Harrisburg High School, our vision is to empower all students with a high-quality education through a respectful, collaborative, supportive, professional learning community in which all achievements are celebrated. And I'm going to turn it back to you, Ms. Finley, to walk us through a little bit more about our vision.
Thank you, Ms. Felton. I just want to share a little bit about the story of our vision. We made it one of the pieces of our CSI plan because the year before we had a lot of great ideas, but we didn't have a single focus. We didn't have something that kept bringing us back together to say, is this where we should be heading all together? So we decided to create a vision, and we began with writing down our shared beliefs and values. And we took those shared beliefs and values, categorized them, and then compared them to our previous mission and realized that our beliefs and values did not correlate with our previous mission. So then began the work of drafting a new vision. I think we wrote somewhere between 10 and 12 drafts. And during that time, we got feedback from teachers, staff, students, parents, and community members. And we really wanted to focus our vision through the lenses of the student, the learning environment, and the school community. From there, we completed our vision, and then we decided we needed to define what those vision pieces looked like, sounded like, felt like, and what that meant for students and staff. Our vision then became this living, breathing thing that Ms. Felton mentioned. We read it all the time to the point where most people have most or part of it memorized. It is read at every meeting. It is on every agenda item. It is on our social media account. It is on our website. We've provided professional learning not only for our staff, but we have drafted lessons. I think we have 12 lessons at this point for advisory, 6 in the fall and 6 in the spring for our students. So they really get a deeper understanding of our vision, as well as we've embedded celebrations throughout our school year with weekly staff, student, and faculty shout outs and end of marking period certificates. One of the other things that has stemmed from living our vision is this creation of a school climate and culture committee. And I want everyone to understand that like all of this came about because we continued to collect data and feedback about what our vision meant, and we kept growing and growing and growing. So a lot of the celebrations and things that the school culture committee did were based on what Mike was talking about earlier about that monitoring and collecting of feedback. So we were able to continue to grow and live our vision to the point where our next chapter in our story is going to be involving our students in creating a vision video to highlight this living vision of our high school, as well as having them help collaborate to create lessons for our vision moving forward. Ms. Felton, I'm going to turn it over back to you.
Thank you, Ms. Finley. And our vision is what drives every steering committee meeting. So every steering committee meeting, we start with the reading of our vision and we select a component of that vision to reflect on or as the focus of the meeting. We meet once a month for 60 minutes. We really try very hard to stay true to that time. We are very pleased to say that we have excellent participation at our monthly meetings. I think some of that is around the fact that we start on time and we end on time. So people understand that the commitment is what we said is going to be and can plan accordingly. We also report out on our action plan progress during our steering committee meetings. So we use the form that Mike shared with you in our implementation teams, which we'll talk about in a moment. We complete that form, and then we report out on the percentage of action steps complete, any adjustments that need to be made, and all of the people that need to have input in the decision-making process are in the room when we're presenting out on our action plan progress. And that's very helpful because we leave the meeting with answers. We review data during our monthly steering committee meetings. We do a deep dive into the data during our quarterly routines, but during our monthly steering committee meetings, we are reviewing the data that's pertinent to our specific action plans. We're also reinforcing the vision component in our meetings. All achievements are celebrated. So we celebrate at every single meeting. Sometimes our celebrations are very small. Sometimes our celebrations are on a large scale. But nonetheless, we honor that portion of our vision and make sure that we find time to celebrate. And I'll share with you, starting the meeting with that celebration component really sets the tone for the meeting and really just makes people open up, feel comfortable, just willing to share. We also review student work during our monthly meetings. Student work can be from any content area, any teacher. Sometimes we ask for the student work, but now it's gotten to the point where teachers are aware that work is being showcased and it's being volunteered, and we don't have enough time to share all of the student work that is coming into us. We also spend some time during this session reviewing our successes, barriers, and challenges. So we start with the successes, we look at where we're experiencing barriers, where we're experiencing challenges, and we discuss it as a team, how we're able to move forward. During the monthly meetings, we also make time for a mini implementation team breakout session. This is in addition to the bi-weekly session, but we want to touch base with our implementation teams just in case when everyone is all together, there's any information that is heard from one of the other teams when we're reporting out on successes, barriers, and challenges that could be incorporated into the work of another implementation team, or if another implementation team is able to assist in any way. The membership of our steering committee, teachers, administrators, deans, students, parents, and we also have members of our LEA that are on our steering committee. And Ms. Spencer, a little bit later, will talk about how that has proven to be very valuable. Our implementation team structure is it's probably my favorite part of this whole school improvement process. All of our implementation teams are teacher-led. Each team is led by a teacher or a dean, and the work is really driven by teacher voice, teacher perception data, student work, what it is we're seeing in the classroom that needs to be addressed in the implementation team. This is really the heart of our work. So when we get together for those 60-minute meetings, we're really just reporting out, identifying successes, barriers, and challenges, and figuring out how to move forward. The real heavy lifting and heart of the school improvement work in our setting are implementation teams. These teams meet bi-weekly. In addition to that little session that they have within our monthly meeting, this is where the action plan document is monitored, adjusted, really honed in on focusing how do we move the action step forward, how do we adjust if needed, and what resources are needed to make that happen. Our implementation teams that we have in our school, we have 3, but within those teams, there are teams. So we have a vision implementation team, we have a literacy implementation team, and we have a building assets reducing risks implementation team. That is the BAR program that you heard Mike referring to a little bit earlier. That is a program that really focuses on meeting individual student needs, and Mrs. Finley will speak to that during a later portion of her presentation. What this has really allowed for, this structure of the steering committee, the implementation teams, whole school, even to some level, whole district involvement in our process, it's just this wonderful information flow where we have the steering committee meetings. That information flows down into the implementation teams, out into the whole school, and then all of that percolates back up, and we go through the whole cycle once more. We have this beautiful common language that's being developed in our school. There's this cross-pollination of initiatives. You walk into one meeting and you feel like you know exactly what's going on because everything is so connected. I don't care what meeting it is you go into in our school, everyone is operating from the same foundation, our school improvement plan, our goals, our evidence-based strategies, our essential practices, and the work that is being generated from our implementation teams. So Ms. Spencer, Ms. Finley, I'm going to turn it back over to you to talk about our successes. Oh, actually, that's Ms. Spencer. My apologies.
That's okay. Thank you, Ms. Felton. We have had some successes this year. We decided to just focus in on just a few of them. First, meeting the needs of our individual learners. It was a very different kind of year, but our staff had to find a way to meet our students where they were. But in particular, our bar in our 9th and 10th grades, with the teacher meetings with students and parents and social workers, they were able to provide individual intervention to many students, and it was very successful for our 9th and 10th grade. The teacher voice and ownership. As a staff, we did believe that our voice was heard. We sent out several forms and surveys because we wanted to know what our staff wanted and what they needed. And from that, we were able to have teachers-led PLCs. We had learning walks, even in the virtual environment, and we had teacher-led professional developments as well. So, and that was some of the things that the teachers wanted. They wanted, like peer-to-peer, teaching. So we were able to provide that for them. Focus on the data. Everyone became aware of our data, and everyone wanted to improve our overall numbers. Our big push this year was our attendance and grades. What we want to improve on is our graduation rate. And so we really did, to the best of our ability this year, we're able to do just that in this environment. Our common language of instruction and expectations, as Ms. Felton said, it was just common across all of our meetings and the entire building. We had a common language, and we did that in several areas. We did it with our BDA lesson plans. Everyone had to use the same lesson plan. We had the same formatting with our syllabus. We had to do the same thing. And also with our grading as well. We went back and did our grading so that every teacher's grade book would look exactly the same. And it really helped our students to be able to look at their grades and calculate what their grades were going to be across the board. So that was very helpful. Stability this year was a big thing at John Harris. We had consistency across the building with our administrative team. Even with all the new things and the unknown things, we were able to maintain some stability. We had a program called Naviance and the CSI plan. We made adjustments to them, but we able to stay focused and move forward. And that stability really was what kept us focused all year long. So that was great. And the collaboration piece, we saw a lot of collaboration with our staff this year, in many areas and across many content areas. We saw them collaborating. I could think of one in particular that was really good. We had an ELA, a ninth grade ELA teacher, and a ninth grade social studies teacher do a project together, and so that was it was a really nice project too. So it was really it was nice to see that. And last, our LEA engagement and support. We really appreciated how our district level administrators engaged and supported us throughout the year. They attended every meeting, they were at every event, and there to to provide support for the students and for the staff. So with that, we wanted to acknowledge and appreciate that their engagement and support was really it was important in this process. So we wanted to acknowledge that. Is that it, Ms. Felton? Ms. Felton, you have anything else you want to add?
I don't at this time, Ms. Spencer. I think you did an excellent job summarizing our key successes.
Okay. All right, so I'll move on to the barriers and challenges then. I believe we all had barriers and challenges this year. However, once again, we just picked out a few that we thought kind of stood out to us. Transferring our plan to virtual learning, trying to implement our CSI plan in the virtual environment, as well as trying to assist our staff with how do we teach in a virtual environment. It was a challenge. The time and competing priorities. Once again, keeping our CSI plan as a priority, along with all of the other new committees and initiatives that came along with being in the virtual environment. We found it to be challenging. However, we moved through it. Next was we were all first year teachers. That's how everyone, I don't know about you all, but that's how we all felt. I'm a teacher. That's how we all felt. And so it was a challenge trying to get our teachers online, and some of our staff were not even computer literate, let alone savvy. So just trying to get them acclimated to being online and how to transport their classroom over into the virtual environment. Next was student learning and the student learning curve. There were many challenges there, from internet access to teaching them. We had to actually teach them how to access their district email for communication purposes, and how to click on hyperlinks. It was, there were a few things that, especially in the beginning of the year, we overcame that by the end of the year, but at the beginning of the year, it was more of a challenge with the students and getting them acclimated to being online and the things that came along with learning online. And then at last, but not least, was our instructional delivery and the uncertainty of it. From time to time, we did not know whether we were going to be online, some of the students were coming back, whether all of the students were coming back, whether we were going to be in a hybrid situation, and how did we plan for that? So that was a challenge as well. But I thank God we were able to meet every challenge, and we overcame every barrier and that presented themselves to us. And so we ended up the year in a pretty good space, even though we did have these challenges and barriers along the way.
Thank you, Ms. Spencer. And much of the reason we were able to overcome our challenges and our barriers is because we had a solid foundation in our school improvement plan, particularly the action plan portion. And through monitoring and adjusting our action plans based on data really helped us to meet and overcome many, many challenges that we faced this year that we, of course, had no idea we were going to face. So our plan was one that was flexible enough to allow us to adjust in a way that met those challenges. Some of the notable adjustments that we made to our plan were just the way we reported out on our quarterly benchmark data. One of the things that we do at the end of our quarterly routine is we do the plus delta, what went well, what could we adjust? And it kept coming back to us from our teachers that they wanted additional context for the numbers. So they wanted to put those percentages into context. So if we saw issues related to attendance and we saw a decline, we wanted to know why were we seeing that? What were some reasons for that? Could we have some discussion around that? If we saw growth in our CDT scores, what was different? How can that be replicated so that we can ensure that growth continues? And of course, we were having these discussions within our implementation teams, but we weren't bringing that out to the full group, to the full faculty, or to the steering committee. So those are some of the adjustments that we made related to our data. As Ms. Spencer and Ms. Finley both mentioned, we do have a really laser-like focus on our data this year, and now with adding that context to the data, we're excited to see where we go. Another notable adjustment that we made is that we had teachers this year participate in the Penn Literacy Network PLN1 course on campus. And our vision for that in our action plan was that the teachers that participated in the class would return to the school and facilitate professional learning. We realized that that really wasn't the best for the teacher or for the students because the teachers themselves, like Ms. Spencer said, everyone was a first-year teacher this year. The teachers were still getting comfortable in this environment, getting comfortable with their own learning, and they were learning technology, content, and process all at the same time. So to throw on top of that professional learning, content development, and facilitation, we just thought was too much. So our teachers engaged in a sharing of their experiences with the PLN1 course versus turnaround professional learning. So that's one of the significant adjustments that we made to our action plan, and I think it was definitely the right choice. We made some other adjustments related to project-based learning and Naviance, and Ms. Spencer is going to speak to those.
Sorry about that. Yes, sorry about that. And our project-based learning, we did actually pause on that this year. We thought that, with the virtual learning and as Ms. Felton said, with everything else that our teachers had on their plate this year, initiating project-based learning may have been just a little bit overwhelming for them. We did still have the teachers that were doing the project-based learning. They were still implementing it in their classrooms. However, we didn't expand it out this year. We thought that it would be better not to. And the Naviance was new to us this year. It was a new goal-setting program that we brought on this year. And we had some challenges with it, but we worked through it. And based on the teacher feedback, it is going to drive how we do our lessons next year. And lesson planning, making the lessons more comprehensive over a period of time. So those are the adjustments that we made with the project-based learning and the Naviance.
Thanks, Ms. Spencer. We also had an additional piece called DataWise this year. And one of the things that happened, Ms. Felton mentioned that information flow, that information trickling back and forth between the school, the steering committee, and the implementation committees, is that because of the strong foundation of our plan, our DataWise committee decided to focus on literacy because they knew the priority was literacy and they were aware of our literacy data. So the natural selection came to pair something that several of our teachers were in the PLN1 course. And so they decided to take portion of that, and we decided to focus on that as a building, not just those in the PLN course. And we did have to monitor and adjust that plan too, because originally we were going to do 2 strategies and we ended up doing 1 and really focusing very strongly on that 1. So because of the data collection and feedback from staff, we were able to monitor and say, we're not ready for the rollout of the second piece, but we will do that at the start of next school year. Another thing that we were focused on this year was the Building Assets and Reducing Risk program that was for our 9th and 10th graders. This year was a little bit tricky because this is really all about getting to know students. And that was a trick for us in the virtual world. One of the components of BAR are lessons called I-Times lessons. And these lessons are all written to be in person. So we had to adapt them and turn them into virtual lessons. One of the things, though, that I think was definitely something that was a benefit of being in the virtual world was the idea of having our BAR meetings via Zoom. And because we were having our BAR meetings via Zoom, we were able to add in this additional layer of intervention for our students where we could have parent meetings during that time. And if we were doing those meetings in person, we most likely would not have been able to have as many parents as we were able to have for those interventions. So that was like a plus in terms of the virtual environment and adding that addition to Zoom. So that kind of takes us right into this piece of the lessons learned for us and moving forward. And one of the biggest things for me this year is that we shouldn't fear our data. You know, we were very worried about what our data was going to look like in the virtual world during a global pandemic, what was going to happen. And we were able to show growth this year, despite all of the things that were going on. It's not what we wanted, you know, it's not as much growth as we wanted, but we were able to do it. And that was because we stayed the course. We stayed on the course we said we were going to do. We implemented everything we said we were going to do. We didn't deviate from that, so that when we were monitoring and adjusting, I think Mike mentioned it earlier when he said, you're not putting out little fires everywhere. We were focused on the initiatives that were our priorities. And because we did that, we were able to improve our data. So we are really looking forward to next year when we will be back in person, and we already have plans in place for our data to grow even more. Ms. Spencer, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, and more lessons that we learned is being flexible and to keep adjusting is something that we need to do. We need to listen to our staff and be able to adjust and be flexible to their needs as well as the students. And so being flexible and to keep adjusting is just like having that living document there. We just keep moving and keep adjusting and making it better and better. And I know it sounds weird, but we do not want to abandon Zoom next year. Zoom, as Ms. Finley just said, was played an intricate part in the BAR intervention with the parents, and it even for our behalf, you know, with our conferences, our parent-teacher conferences, and our open house, you know, we just felt like that some parents were able to come that may not have been able to come in other years. So we're not going to totally abandon Zoom next year. We will keep it in the places that will really benefit our students, their parents, and the staff. And over to you, Ms. Felton.
Thank you, Ms. Spencer and Ms. Finley. Two of our final lessons learned was information flow is key for common language and systems development. We really relied on our common language and our systems development during this time of uncertainty. It helped us to maintain focus. It helped teachers to feel a sense of ease. It helped students to feel a sense of ease, so that in every classroom they went into, there was a familiarity, there was a similar routine, there was a similar instructional delivery model, and all of that was driven by our plan. So just as we mentioned earlier, you could go into one meeting after the next and really see the evidence of this common language and systems. You could also see that within our classrooms, and that was comforting to our students and to our staff. And if you need to develop plans within plans, stay focused. Maintain the focus, stay the course. It's okay to layer within your plan to address needs that arise. And this year was the perfect example of that. We had to layer plans for how to deliver virtually, how to embed professional learning into our professional learning plan that not only address our literacy strategies in our Building Assets Reducing Risks program, but how to use Zoom, how to use Google Classroom, how to use other technology apps. So it's very, very beneficial to come into it with the mindset of being flexible, being willing to adjust, and to be willing to develop those plans within plans. And as long as you're communicating, using common languages, and building common systems, those systems will support that plan adjustment and development. So we're just going to open it up for any questions and discussions if we have time. Mike, is that something that we have time for?
Yeah, I think we definitely have some time for that.
Okay, I will stop sharing so that we can do that.
So I'm wondering, can you talk about a time you had mentioned the importance of the LEA being part of those routines? Can you talk about a time when school had a challenge that it was really vital to have the LEA in the meetings because you were able to overcome that challenge or at least get a path forward around something?
Sure. The development of our professional learning calendars for the building is something that we need to start early. And having the LEA in the room, being aware of what our professional learning plans are, so that district professional learning plans support our building level plan and our building level plan supports our district level plan. Also, we have an attendance team that grew out of some of our school improvement goals, and our attendance team having the LEA in the room can get answers immediately to policy and procedure questions that keep the work moving forward. Mrs. Finley is a leader on our attendance team, and you can speak to that a little bit more, Ms. Finley, how the LEA has been an asset to the work of the attendance team.
Yeah, they have been able to get us access to certain systems that we did not have access to at the building level, as well as our IT department being at the table. They are working on creating a different data collection tool for us for next year so that we can be more efficient with our time. Because of the large size of our high school, we want to make sure that everyone is doing the best work they can and the most efficient work they can. So it was really helpful to have several different facets of our district leadership as part of our attendance committee. Another little side note was because our chief academic officer was part of our vision committee, we were able to publish some of our celebrations on our mayoral's channel so that our parents could not only see our student celebrations on our district website, but they could see them on TV as well.
Thank you, Ms. Finley.
So, sorry, I'll ask some questions since I think you guys are the most experienced in the room with this, implementing some of this. In the beginning, when we first started talking about those bi-weekly implementation team meetings, did that seem like an overwhelming schedule, or I think because it kind of came up first, after developing the action plans, we talked about how we would look at it every 2 weeks. I'm just wondering what the reaction was, kind of off the bat, and then how you were able to settle into that flow.
Right. In the beginning, it was a little bit overwhelming, the 2 meetings per month. But what we were able to do is we were able to decrease the amount of time from an hour to 30 minutes for those biweekly implementation team meetings because the team members were doing so much work outside of the meetings. So we recognized that, and we didn't really see the need to hold a 1 hour long meeting. We shifted it to 30 minutes. And if you didn't even need the 30 minutes, that was fine. The key was being able to touch base, review those action plan steps, and evaluate the progress on each step so that you could look for adjustments that could need to be made. But we did not hold 1 hour long twice a month. We did the 30 minutes or as much time was needed. And for some teams, they made the decision to meet once biweekly, and then their second biweekly would occur during the monthly. So really you had for some teams, you had the monthly meeting, and then you had one other additional biweekly.
Thanks. I think
Ms. Felton, can I just jump in there too? And then as far as the vision committee, there were times when we were actually meeting weekly, and we were able to pare our meetings down to like a 20-minute slot because there were times of the year where we had more tasks and more data to collect. But at first everybody was like, oh, we're never going to be able to meet this many times. And then we ended up meeting more than we thought we were going to meet.
Thanks. I think you had a question in the chat, asking if you could talk a little bit about the composition of your implementation teams and how you determined who might be best suited for those roles.
That's a great question. So we put out a Google survey, and people self-selected their implementation team. What we did do, though, is we did make some strong suggestions to our LEA team leaders so that they were each spread out across the implementation team. So there's LEA representation on each of the implementation teams as well. As Ms. Finley mentioned, our Chief Academic Officer serves on our Vision implementation team. But the implementation teams are self-selected. People went where their areas of interest lie. I see Dr. Shotwell's question about the school leader not being the facilitator of the routines. I think that is wise. We are in a position right now where the quarterly meetings are co-facilitated by Mike and myself. All of the implementation teams are led by teachers. And even though those quarterly meetings, those quarterly routines are facilitated by Mike and I, we meet prior with our implementation leads, and we develop the agenda collaboratively. And when we say facilitate, we truly mean facilitate. Mike and I are not the ones doing all of the direction or talking, if you will, during the meeting. We are kind of like the glue that is pulling it and holding it together, but the implementation team leads are the ones that are really running those routines.
I was going to type this in the chat, but I'll just ask the question. So for the schools that are here that aren't in a CSI process, which means you don't automatically have an external facilitator, are there any individuals that you can think of at your school or district level that might be where you would lean into to find that external facilitator who is not deeply embedded necessarily in the day-to-day of the work, but that could be able to be that person to co-facilitate with you as a school leader? I was just curious to hear, because I know not everyone has access to the same kind of supports that come from the CSI process, but what would be some of your ideas of how you might utilize that process?
So one of the things, we're not yet doing it here, but one of the things that I have done is I have helped other schools to facilitate their quarterly routines. So there's 3 CSI schools in our district, but every school is involved in the school improvement process, and every school is doing quarterly routines and monthly meetings biweekly. So I have supported other schools. So it may be cross-building support. Maybe it's building leaders are supporting other building leaders. I could also envision a case where for our situation where we do have LEA involvement, where there's some support with facilitation from LEA members. We are not, I see the question about, competing priorities. That was one of our struggles. Absolutely, yes, we do have that. We do have that. And there are cases where teachers are pulled. There are cases where they are just not able to make it for whatever reason. And we honor that, we accept that. We also make it a point to make sure that all of our documents are housed in a shared drive so everyone has access to them. We keep notes for all of our meetings that are accessible to all. We also make ourselves available to meet with anyone who was not able to attend the meetings. I will say the information that is conveyed at the meetings is not necessarily the most critical. What is most critical is the work that's being done outside of the meetings. So it's very easy for someone to really get caught up if they quote unquote miss a meeting, as long as they are engaged in that work that's occurring in between meetings, which all of our team members are. But that is definitely a reality and a struggle we face as well, which is why, to Ms. Spencer's point about not abandoning Zoom when this is all over, we feel that Zoom is still going to be a tool for gathering in a way that provides people to join meetings from any location. Our building is very large too, so it could take you 10 to 15 minutes to just walk to a meeting. So Zoom is a viable option for us moving forward.
All right, any other questions for the John Harris team? I want to thank you. I really appreciate you all coming together to put this together and kind of show how, when I talk about implementation, it seems very straightforward and linear, but I know in working with your school, like there's a lot of flexibility, a lot of adjustments that you've made to make it work for you. And I really, for our participants here, really want to demonstrate how, what we talk about can really be implemented in a lot of different ways. And the team at John Harris has gone above and beyond this year to make things work. So I appreciate you highlighting that and talking about your experiences from this year. I'm excited to see where next year takes us.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate the opportunity to share just a portion of our story, and we appreciate the support that we get from you and your team and from Dr. Shotwell.
Of course. So, so I made an adjustment while we were talking. I wanted to make sure that we got the full experience from the John Harris team. So I'm going to skip the breakout rooms. And we're really just going to move into the kind of a closing reflection and comments. So I do want to open it up for a minute. If anybody has any questions about any of the monitoring routines or technical question, or just want some more clarification on how some of the routines function and work. So just independently, as before we, just a second, I will put up the slide for the attendance that I think everybody needs to use the QR code if they want to, get counted for today. So independently, or if you want to add something to the chat, you're more than welcome. But what is one way you will utilize the routine structures or tools discussed today? So hopefully we were able to provide, for our participants some ideas or some thoughts that may be beneficial to your schools moving forward, to your systems moving forward. And then also the tools, feel free to use that bi-weekly form. There is protection on that. That's one thing. Oh, no, I'm sorry, it's a Google form. Protection came off of it when I turned it into a Google form, so never mind. That's completely editable to make however you need to. And for those who requested that when the access was blocked, I can put together some templates for those the monthly and the quarterly, and I can happy to send them to you since I got your emails when it requested information. So I'll put something together and email it out to everybody, and feel free to use it if you'd like it. And if not, put it in your pocket for some time. But, so. I do want to thank everybody for your participation today. I know it's the end of the year. A lot is going on to wrap the school year up. And I hopefully this was beneficial, and I hope you can see how, the regular monitoring of your routines or of your plans really will help with implementation and will lead to better outcomes for students. So on the screen, you should see the tiny URL for attendance, and you can also use the QR code with the exit code of 84916. And I will leave this up, as people want to sign out. If there's any final questions or thoughts, feel free to ask in the chat. And I will definitely send those other documents out. So thank you for putting that in the chat. We found them useful. So if you can adapt them and make them useful for your systems, we're happy to provide those. Thank you all for attending. I really appreciate it.